Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, 4 U.S. citizens kidnapped in Mexico. Mexican police searching for 4 Americans. The FBI says they were kidnapped after gunmen opened fire on their vehicle in a border city where cartels often fight among themselves. We'll bring you the story. ISIS has thousands of fighters around the world, and analysts warn they intend to strike again.
The idea that they don't want to attack us again like a 9/11, but even bigger, is foolish. They want to destroy America.
See why experts say this threat isn't going away. A battle over abortion, as a group of pro-life doctors is banned from holding an exhibit at a medical conference.
I think it's always a bad idea to silence other people's opinions. Again, look, we think abortion is wrong. They think our position is wrong. So let's have a discussion.
What's the relationship between the Bible and money? We're going to hear from an entrepreneur in Israel who talks about the biblical patriarchs and prosperity. And she's written a different kind of Bible study. It's for people who don't read the Bible.
Fewer people are reading the Bible these days. So to get introduced to the Bible, you have to make sure that people are not intimidated.
Those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We want to begin this half hour with the search for those 4 Americans kidnapped in Mexico. Mexican police searching for them after they were kidnapped in the border town of Matamoros. That happened on Friday. Take a look at the video showing a group of heavily armed men capturing the victims at gunpoint. The FBI investigating the video. The scene illustrates the terror has prevailed for years in this area. It's a city dominated by factions of the Gulf Cartel who often fight among themselves. The 4 Americans have been identified. One of them was reportedly going to Mexico for a tummy tuck surgery, and the other 3 went along to help split up the driving duties. The FBI is offering a $50,000 reward for the return of the victim and the arrest of the kidnappers. The White House is advising Americans not to travel to that part of Mexico because of the, quote, risk of crime and kidnapping. I want to turn now to another threat faced by Americans. If you thought the Islamic State terror group had gone away, think again. Despite military defeat in Syria and Iraq, ISIS still has thousands of fighters and some 25 affiliates around the world. Now, Western intelligence agencies are bracing for terror attacks after the group called for revenge against Christians. This after a Danish activist publicly burned a Quran in Sweden just weeks ago. CBN's Dale Hurd is on this story.
Protests erupted throughout the Islamic world after the public burning of a Quran in Sweden last month. Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said while the burning was deeply disrespectful, it was protected under freedom of expression. The Islamic State terror group on social media has called for revenge attacks on Christians worldwide. The Muslim holy month of Ramadan begins March 23rd, and last year's observance saw 42 ISIS terror attacks in just 3 days. The threat of ISIS has returned, and Western intelligence agencies are on the lookout for any signs of a terrorist attack. Security expert Eric Karen says that in the Middle East and Asia, ISIS never went away.
They have approximately 16,000 fighters between Iraq and Syria. They control 6 million people in that region. They have franchises throughout the world. We're talking probably around 25 franchises throughout Africa and Europe and here in America.
A recent United Nations report also shows the ISIS threat increasing. Terrorism expert Sargis Sengeri says while the U.S. had to defeat ISIS on the battlefield, that alone wasn't enough to stop the movement.
You have to kill folks on the battlefield to take ground. You have to do that. But I don't think we ever fought against the ideology that really resonates between the 6 inches of people's foreheads. So it will continue to fight and will continue to take territory. It will continue to force individuals to either convert or basically, die in the process.
Tina Ramirez with the humanitarian group Hardwired Global calls the resurgence of ISIS a nightmare for both Christians and Muslims in the Middle East.
ISIS used to hold court in the ancient churches in the city of Mosul and sentence Muslims, Christians, others to death, to having their hands or legs chopped off. and then the women, thousands of women that we know who've been sexually enslaved. So the trauma that the entire community went through was horrific.
ISIS is encouraging Muslims to use any method to kill Westerners, including trucks and nail guns. Karen believes the U.S. could be very vulnerable to a major terrorist attack.
On the southern border, the northern border is wide open. We know that there's over 55 million shipping containers that come into America. Less than 2% are examined. We need to take the gloves off and understand that this threat's not going away. It's only increased in the last few years. The idea that they don't want to attack us again like a 9/11, but even bigger, is foolish. They want to destroy America.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Now turning to a controversy involving a major issue in domestic politics, abortion. A pro-life group of doctors was recently shocked when they traveled to an annual OB-GYN conference. They were told when they arrived the exhibit spot they booked a year in advance had been canceled. Now some Republican lawmakers are calling out the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, demanding they stop discriminating against those in their profession who hold pro-life views. CBN's Caitlin Burke is on this story.
I think it's always a bad idea to silence other people's opinions. Again, look, we think abortion is wrong. They think our position is wrong. So let's have a discussion.
The American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists has hosted a booth at the annual OB-GYN conference for the last 15 years. Incoming CEO Dr. Christina Francis says she believes the decision to ban her group from this year's event is purely because of their stance on abortion.
Despite multiple requests for an explanation as to why, the only explanation we've received is a vague explanation that we disagree with ACOG, presumably on the issue of abortion. This is very interesting considering the theme of this year's conference, which is building bridges.
In a statement to CBN News, ACOG said it, quote, welcomes exhibitors that align with our commitment to the advancement of evidence-based scientific information.
I don't know what they mean by that. You know, the evidence is pretty clear. In an abortion, the mortality rate is 50%. I hope they can't argue with that. And I'm surprised that while only 7% of obstetricians and gynecologists in this country do abortions, why would they quash the opinions of people who disagree with them?
Maryland Representative Andy Harris is a physician and co-chair of the House Pro-Life Caucus. Members of his committee sent a letter threatening to, quote, take ACOG to task if the group doesn't immediately make some changes and end their discrimination against pro-life doctors.
Dr. Francis says she believes it's important for the next generation of OB-GYNs to decide for themselves what the scientific evidence says about the effects of abortion on women's health. She's invited the CEO of ACOG to a scientific debate on the issue, anytime, anywhere. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
What's the relationship between the biblical patriarchs and prosperity? We're going to hear what one entrepreneur says about the Bible and money. We've got that story for you when we come back. A recent event in Jerusalem brought together business innovators with investors who could help turn their ideas into reality. Some observers remarked about the spiritual nature of the gathering. And as Paul Strand explains, that should be no surprise when you consider Israel's history.
A number of believers are uncomfortable mixing the Almighty and money. They point to scriptures such as Matthew 6, verse 24, that decrees you cannot serve both God and money. Entrepreneur Jon Medved, founder of Our Crowd, begs to differ. He says people, like those at this investor summit, need to examine the innovation and faith displayed by Israel's founding fathers and how that led to wealth. It goes all the way back to Abraham.
He was actually quite a successful businessman. He was, they say actually, even in Hebrew, he kaved b'tzon. He was heavy with flock. You know, whenever you talk about a guy who's like a heavy investor, Abraham was that kind of a person. His son Isaac drilled wells. He was a hydrologist. Okay, when you read the Bible, you realize that he was like Israel's first water expert. And his son, Jacob, was a biotechnologist. Remember what he did with his flocks in terms of changing their colors and stripes, okay, and how to breed them. His son, Joseph, was the mashbir, was this incredible private-public partner guy. He ran all of Egypt, which was the economic powerhouse of the time. So this goes all the way back into our DNA. This is what Israel is supposed to be doing.
Medved points out if people will follow these examples, walk in their own giftings, and strive to make the world a better place, God will bless their efforts. As the book of Proverbs puts it, great wealth is in the house of the righteous, and lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Still ahead, an author who's written 2 books on a Bible study for those who don't read the Bible. We're going to hear about how it works right after this. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Myra Kahn Adams is a conservative political and religious writer and executive director of signfromgod.org. She's also a Bible study teacher. In 2020, she launched her weekly Bible studies online at townhall.com. Now, Myra has written 2 books called Bible Study for Those Who Don't Read the Bible, Parts 1 and 2. And she joined this week's The Prayer Link on the CBN News Channel to talk about it.
Well, Myra, that's an interesting title, Bible Study for Those Who Don't Read the Bible. There's got to be a story behind that title.
Well, it's the truth. Fewer people are reading the Bible these days. So to get introduced to the Bible, you have to make sure that people are not intimidated by the Word of God. So this makes it sort of an easy on-ramp. That way, the title welcomes people who maybe have never opened the Bible in their life. And I was one of them. I mean, I grew up in a home without a Bible. I was born Jewish, but I later found the Lord when I was in college. But I grew up in a home without a Bible. The Bible is very intimidating, and it can be very intimidating. Those of us who read the Word and study the Word and love the Word, we know it's not intimidating. It's welcoming. It's loving, and we learn and are comforted by it. But those who are not familiar with it, they don't even know where to begin. So the title really says it all. It's like a big warm hug. Start here. It's okay. Love that.
And Myra, what happened in your personal life that compelled you to do these Bible studies?
Well, I had been writing for townhall.com. My weekly Bible studies run on Town Hall. They have since February of 2020. And one of the executives at Salem that owns Town Hall was impressed because I had written a piece. It was Easter of 2019. I had written a piece about the Shroud of Turin. And he told me it had done really well. And he thought, maybe you want to consider writing a faith piece on Sundays. So one thing led to another. And starting in February of 2020, I started the weekly Bible study. And I had no idea it was going to catch on with readers. And it has. And now, as I said, starting its 4th year. And so readers encouraged me to put the weekly studies in a book. So that's what started the first book, which it was not called Part 1 because I didn't know there was ever going to be a Part 2. But the first book, Bible Study for Those That Don't Read the Bible, then led to Part 2. And the last study that's in Part 2 was volume number 113. This past Sunday, I just wrote 155. So I almost have enough for Part 3. But it's all about the readers. If Town Hall didn't feel like readers were clicking on it, my Bible study, wouldn't be on there every Sunday because it's a secular political news site. So having a weekly Bible study is unusual.
Yeah, what's the benefit of being on a conservative secular website? I mean, that's almost heard of for a Christian Bible teacher.
Well, it's the way the Lord just arranged things. I was asked to do it, and I'm not a Bible scholar by any means. I basically learn as I go along, but, I had been studying the Word for a long time. But one thing just led to another. It's the hand of God. It's just one of those things. You all know how the Lord works.
Amen.
When he wants something to happen, he makes things happen. And sometimes you say, how did that happen? And there's only one answer. And what ultimately ends up happening, and this is something that when I saw this yesterday, a reader sent me this. Sometimes, they put comments on the site, but then readers send me emails. And this reader sent me this yesterday, and it just touched me because I knew I was going to be on the show today. She wrote me, she goes, "Thank you for getting me into the Word and looking at Jesus on a more regular basis. And I thought, that is why I write this Bible study. People aren't expecting to see the Bible study when they come to townhall.com for news and politics. And they see the Bible study and they click on it.
It's a divine strategy.
It actually, that is so true. I never actually said that
strategy,
phrase.
Myra.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that phrase from you because I really do like that phrase a lot. So that's how it all happened.
It's beautiful. And, you know, what was I going to say? You've got two now. You've got two books out. Myra's books, Bible Study for Those Who Don't Read the Bible. And now I know why you have the Star of David, because you mentioned that you were born Jewish, and you are Jewish.
Yes, I have that on the front of the on the cover here.
I love it.
Which, of course, you know, blows people's minds away, and as you can imagine.
Yeah, that's a whole other story for a different interview. But Myra,
that's a whole other story. That's exactly right.
Thank you so much for being with us, Myra Kahn Adams. God bless you.
Thank you for having me.
And for more from Myra Kahn Adams on studying the Bible, as well as an interview with author Beth Townsend about finding your purpose, be sure to check out the prayer link on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 6:30 Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News app or YouTube as well. Coming up, a health expert tells CBN News about an ancient part of the American diet that basically has disappeared. Now it's being called a superfood. We're going to hear why it's so healthy when we come back. Bone broth is making a comeback. It's an ancient staple of the diet, but it's largely disappeared from what Americans eat in recent generations. But now it's being touted as a superfood by health experts, including a nutritionist appearing on this week's episode of Healthy Living.
Bone broth's got a nice little fix of collagen, a nice little fix of protein in there. It's got amino acids. It's got a lot of different nutritional elements in there. It keeps you warm from your head to your toes. It's very, very, this is my favorite thing, restorative. And this is what people need. People are burned out. They're tired. Their engine needs a break. They need things to fire up their liver. They need things to fire up their thyroid, their adrenals, all of these facets of the body, which become very depleted and make you run on no energy, which ages you like rapid fire. Bone broth seem to really add that restorative mix to it. Talk about getting slimmer, talk about getting younger. I have not, in my history of 25 plus years doing this for a living, I have not seen anything that's been as good of an addition to the diet to actually have this happen than bone broth, which is why I'm spending all my time professing you've got to get this in your diet.
So how do we do that? You recommend about 2 cups a day, right? So do you make it at home in the crock pot? Doesn't that take like a day? Or on the stove? Don't you have to do it for like 24 hours? Can you really leave your stove on that long, or the crock pot plugged in while you're sleeping?
Oh, there's ways around that. There's ways around that. And I love this question. Before I answer this question, I want to just kind of add an adjunct onto what I said, which is, we talked about slimgestion, and we talked about healed and sealed. We talked about cleansed, not clogged. Bone broth, from what I can see in all of the hundreds and thousands of transformations that we have clocked in. Kristen just got on the cover of Woman's World magazine. She's one of our transformations, lost over 100 pounds, getting her digestion in order and healing her gut, using bone broth as well as other elements to our programs. It heals and seals your gut so beautifully. So start getting it in your diet. I recommend 2 cups a day, and have this just like you would coffee, tea, or your favorite latte. Add it in. A lot of people add it in the morning. They have it again when they're starting to feel that kind of that sluggishness. They add that in. You can make beautiful, what I call broth loading soups. It's one of my favorite things. Like back in the day, there was always a cauldron on the stove with this beautiful broth and these soups. Start getting used to that. Start making that habitual in your home because it makes such a big difference. You can also put bone broth in ice cube trays, stick it in the freezer. Whenever you want to saute anything, throw one of those cubes in there, add it to anything that you can. And you don't have to make it from scratch. If you do, I suggest a pressure cooker because it takes just a couple of hours, but there are even better ways. Now there are products, I actually have these myself, that come in powdered form, dehydrated forms that have beautiful, unbelievable flavors, things like French onion, Thai lemongrass, rosemary thyme. They're delicious, and you can add them to all kinds of dishes and meals.
And you can hear more about the benefits of bone broth from Dr. Petrucci on Healthy Living tonight at 8:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. Again, you can find it on the CBN News app or watch it on YouTube. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable, and today I want to leave you with this thought to post, tag, tweet, and share with those in your circles of influence. Faith demands action. If you have faith, make a move. Act on it. And when you move, watch God move just like that. With that word, I encourage you to talk faith, but more importantly, walk in faith and make this a terrific Tuesday. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. You can also write us, newswatch@cbn.com, and reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Make it a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.